We're up to the Mishnah, Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Aleph. The Mishnah in today's Daf deals with shechting an animal that is almost going to die. So it's not dead yet, but it's dying. So now technically, it's not a nevela, because a nevela is a dead animal. It's not a treifa. The treifa is an animal that has a birth defect that won't survive. This is just an older animal. The halacha is, you're able to shecht it, but we have to ensure that it died through the shechita and didn't die, let's say, the moment before, or maybe even the beginning of the incision. How do you know that didn't kill the animal and it didn't die through shechita? So the halacha is that the animal has to do some sort of movement. Hashaychet is some sukenes. If you shecht an animal that's close to death, the halacha is the animal has to show pirkus. Pirkus means to jerk around. It has to move. Its leg and its arm, have to move. That shows that it died through the shechita. It has to jerk after the shechita. That shows that the animal died through the shechita and not died right before. It has to have the strength to move the leg and the arm. Rav Elazar Omer, Dayim Zinka. Rav Elazar says it doesn't actually have to move. As long as the blood sprays out, that shows that it had vitality and it died through the shechita. Omer, Rabbi Shimon, Shimon agrees with Rav Eliezer that all you need is for the blood to spread out, to splash out. Now, what happens if it's at night? I can't see where the blood splattered. As long as tomorrow morning you check, and you find the walls are full of blood. This is not the walls of the slaughterhouse. This is the walls of the neck, meaning that the blood splattered past the incision point on the neck. That's kshera. It's kosher. Shezinka ukamidas Rav Eliezer, because he follows the shita of Rav Eliezer that as long as it sprays out, it's enough. And again, his shita is that as long as he sees it spraying, and as long as you see that there's simanim the next morning on the neck that it's sprayed, that's going to be enough. Chum have a more lenient shita. The Tana Kamos or Shem Gamliel holds that you have to move the arm and the leg of the animal, has to jerk. The Chum say no, either or. You don't need both. Now, this halacha that the animal has to move when it's dying, for it to be a kosher shechita, is echad behema daka v'echad behema gasa. It's true of the smaller animals and the larger animals, but there's a difference. Behema daka shepashta yadav lehechzira. If a small animal moves its arm but doesn't retract it, so it just moves the forearm in one direction, that's not indicative that it actually had vitality. That's actually just a natural spasm of shechita. If it moves forward and back, that's pirchas. But if it's only one direction, then it's not so pashut. But if it only moved in one direction, it's pasul. It's only because if it's one directional, that's haitzas nefesh. That's just a sign that the animal had haitzas nefesh. That's not a sign that the animal had any vitality. However, by a behema gasa, as long as it moves one arm, it doesn't have to actually retract. The Mishnah then concludes, this whole concept that it has to show vitality is shahiza b'chesed musukenes. It's only if the animal is dying. A regular healthy animal, you don't have to check that it's, it moves, and if it doesn't move, it's a treifa or it's a nevela. No. It's dafka. If the animal's dying, you have to make sure. If the animal seemed to be healthy, even if it doesn't move, then it's going to be kosher. Now, the whole premise of the Mishnah is that a mesukenes, an animal that is dying, as long as you show that it died after the shechita, meaning that it had some vitality, it's kosher. Now, the reason for this is, and this is the basic premise of the entire daf, is that the Torah aser is a nevela, which is if it dies of that shechita. It asers a treifa, which is an animal that has a defect that it cannot survive. This is a sort of a third category. It's dying. And the premise of the Mishnah is that as long as it doesn't die before the shechita, even though it's dying, it's a kosher shechita. So the Gemara wants to know, how do you know this? The Gemara says, how do you know that an animal that's dying is still kosher as long as it's shechted properly? So the Gemara says, what's the heter? What's the source? It says the Gemara is the opposite. No, that's not how it works. I don't have to bring a raya that it's mutter. You have to bring a raya that it's aser. You bring a raya that it should be a problem, and I'll tell you a source. I don't have to find sources that it's kosher. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you the source that it should be a problem. Tichsev, zois hachaya shetaychelu. Hachaya usually implies it's referring to an animal, but hachaya also means vitality. It has to be alive. Chaya ochol, v'shein oichav. The animal is dying, loy soichav. So this pasuk is actually the source that should aser as mesukenes, because it's dying, it's not chaya. So how do you know that animal that's mesukenes is taka kosher? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you the source. Midam rachman nevelo seichel. Well, the fact that the Torah asers an nevela, which is an animal that's dead, mechlad mesukenes sharia. Obviously, if the Torah has to aser an animal that's dead, that means an animal that's dying is allowed. Because if an animal that's dying is aser, you don't have to aser a nevela. If every animal that's dying, right, nevela pashtus, and the Gemara will object that you could have a nevela of that animal dying, but the Gemara assumes that every animal that dies is dying. I mean, you can have it where it's shot in the head, but pashtus, every animal that dies, a nevela means the animal just drops dead. That means that before it dies, a moment before it dies, it was dying. If every animal that's dying is aser, a mesukenes is aser, the Torah doesn't have to aser a nevela. Every nevela, by definition, is a mesukenes before that. So the fact that the Torah asers mesukenes, a nevela, implies that a mesukenes is allowed. The Gemara says no. Maybe they're both aser. Maybe every mesukenes is really a nevela, meaning that every nevela is really mesukenes, meaning that every time the Torah aser is a nevela, that inclusive of two things. It's including an animal that died and an animal that's dying. Really, an animal that's dying is also aser, so why do you have a separate nevela? Nevela is a lav, and this is an asay. So maybe a mesukenes is taka aser. So whereas no, it can't be that a nevela is actually a mesukenes as well. And it's now, you have two sources. You have mesukenes and nevela. They're both referencing the same thing, an animal that's dying, and obviously an animal that dies. And now you know that it's over a lav and asay. I'll tell you why it can't be. A mesukenes and a nevela cannot be the same thing, because it says regarding a nevela ki yomus. The animal has to die. The fact that the Torah calls a nevela as yomos, it means that it's only a nevela when it dies. Before that, it's not a nevela. So the fact that the Torah asks a nevela and nevela is only after death implies that before death it's not asr. Says the Gemara, maybe a nevela and musakenes are the same. The Torah says nevela is death. I'll tell you like this: when the animal's dying, it's an asay. After the animal dies, now it additionally gets a lav. But maybe they are included. Maybe musakenes is taka included in the Isser Nevela, and Kiyomus is telling you that there's a lav after death, but before death, it's the asay of a Nevela. Perhaps. So says the Gemara. So the Gemara says like this: Ela midaber achmana treifa loy soichal. I'll tell you the source. Instead of attacking it from a Nevela's perspective, the Gemara is going to attack it from a treifa perspective. The Torah asks a treifa. A treifa is an animal that is dying because it has a birth defect. If the Torah has to aser a treifa, that means a mesukenes, which does not have a birth defect, is not an aser. Mechlad the mesukenes sharia, the isal gedai the mesukenes asira. Because if you believe that mesukenes is aser, hasha mesukenes loy mechasra asira. If every mesukenes is aser and they don't have a birth defect or a defect, treifa miboy, then a treifa which has a defect, kal v'chomer it's aser. So the fact that the Torah has to aser a treifa implies that a mesukenes is not aser. Says the Gemara, same thing. Demahinu treifa and mesukenes. Maybe they're the same, meaning both prohibitions apply to an animal that's dying. And to tell you that every treifa is both a sukenes and a treifa, and you're over an asay and a los asay. The Gemara says, Im kein nevela de kasar rachman alami. So 1 second. You tell me that if the animal's dying in mesukenes, it's really mesukenes and a treifa. But didn't we just got finished saying that the way I know it's then a nevela also? 1 second. So every single time the animal's dying, it's mesukenes. It's also a treifa. So by definition, and every mesukenes, if a mesukenes is aser, that means that every animal that's dying is aser. So then a treifa and nevela are now included in the same isser. If you believe that what only aser is after death, then a treifa and nevela are separate. Nevela is where it died without shchita, treifa is where it died with a defect. But if you're telling me now that dying is also aser, then every nevela is really mesukenes. Every treifa is a mesukenes. So how many? What's the point of repeating the lavim so many times? So the Gemara says, Dilma hainu vela hainu treifa hainu mesukenes. Maybe taka, you're right. It's all repeating. Lavrla b'shnei lav maseh. So why does the Torah have to ask this so many times? Every mesukenes, every nevela really was a mesukenes. Every treifa was a mesukenes. Every treifa is a nevela. Every nevela is a treifa, because they're all included in mesukenes. So why do I have so many lavim? Because it's to tell me that if I eat any of these animals, I'm over 2 lavim and aseh. So how do you know that a mesukenes is allowed? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you. El mihacha. V'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa yasel l'chol malacha v'ochel loy techlu. There's a special lav answering the chelev of a nevela and a treifa. Now, and the Gemara addresses it. Why does the Torah have to aser a special pasuk to aser the chaylev of a nevela and the chaylev of a treifa? Chaylev is already aser. So Amr Torah Yava Iser Nevela v'Yachal Iser Chaylev. It's to tell me that even though the animal's a nevela, you're going to be over 2 lavim if you eat the chaylev. You're going to eat you're over the lav of chaylev and over the chaylev of a nevela. Yava Iser Treifa v'Yachal Iser Chaylev. Go to the next page. So you have a special pasuk that's asering the chaylev. In addition to stam being chaylev, it's now also chaylev of a nevela and chaylev of a treifa. V'yisal k'taydach treifa hainu musukenes. But if you're telling me that every treifa is really musukenes, meaning the treifa prohibition begins when the animal is dying, then here's the thing: lichtav rachmana chaylev nevela yasel chomalacha v'chaylev treifa leisechaylev. The pasuk only has to tell me the additional chaylev of a treifa and not mention nevela. V'ano amina. And I'll make the following argument: if you're telling me, it's very similar to the argument that we had before, which is there's a special pasuk telling me that every chaylev is aser. There's a special pasuk telling me that you're over the iser chaylev of nevela and treifa as well. So if I eat the chaylev of a nevela or chaylev of a treifa, I'm over 2 lavim. The question is, if every animal that's dying is really a mesukenes, and that's aser, then every nevela and treifa are already aser. You don't need both. Tell me that every nevela, every treifa, the chaylev is aser. That'll include mesukenes, which will by definition include nevela as well. The Gemara says the very fact that it mentions specifically treifa and nevela separately implies that the isurim begin after death. You see, this is the basic premise. If the isurim begin while the animal's dying, then every treifa and nevela are the same, because they all were dying at some point. So the very fact that the Torah has to separately aser a nevela and a treifa, that implies that the isurim are different. Says the Gemara, Maskef Lamar Baravashi, the Dilma Lo'ilam Emelach, Hainu treifa, Hainu Sukenes. Really, I would tell you a treifa and sukenes are the same. If you say if that's the case, then why does the Torah have to aser a nevela and treifa separately? Udeka nevela dekasam chana. I'll tell you why. Your whole premise is that if every misukenes is a treifa, that means that every Mesukenes is also a nevela, because every animal that dies was dying. That's not so true. You could have a nevela where the guy shoots it in the head, so it wasn't dying. So really, Mesukenes is taka a treifa, but nevela is separate. Why is nevela separate? Because not every time that it's animals a nevela was it dying. It could be shot in the head. So the Gemara says no. Hasamnami i'eshed lehem Mesukenes porta mikami delifsak laruba. The Gemara actually doesn't talk about shot in the head. The Gemara talks that you cut the animal in half. Gemara says even then, there's a moment before it dies that it's dying. Basically, every animal that dies has a split second before it dies that it's dying. And if every animal that's dying is a treifa, that means by definition that every animal that's dying is also a nevela. And the Torah would not have to make separate lavim. So that's how I know that a musukenes is allowed, as long as it's shechted properly. Ibai Sema, another source, Im Kain, if every single time the animal is close to death, it's aser, lema chaylev nevela v'treifa. What do you have to have the extra word chaylev for? Chaylev lamli? The answer is to tell me. Every nevela, it says the word chaylev twice, by nevela and treifa. You know why? Because it's telling me, zuhi she'eincha v'chaluk mibasra. Dafka by the treifa and the nevela, are the chaylev and the body the same? Right? You have the chaylev of the animal, which is always aser. All chaylev animals are aser. And then you have a treifa where the body is aser, and a nevela the body is aser. It's to tell me, zuhi, this is the animal where the nevela, where the chaylev and the rest of the body are the same, in that they're both aser. But there's another case of a dying animal, shechel b'chaluk mebasra. The chaylev is different. The chaylev is aser, but the basar is allowed. Be'izu misukenes. That's a source that the misukenes is taka allowed. Ibay semehacha, or a third source, that a mesukenes is taka allowed, because the pasuk says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yechezkel he had to eat certain things, certain cakes, which were prepared in a disgusting way, in order to be metaken for Klal Yisrael. And he responded as in the following: Yechezkel was saying, I don't want to be metama my body. My body is so tahar when I was alive, because he says, V'oymar, Hashem Elikim, hine nafshi loy metuma. I was always make sure my soul was not unclean. My soul was always clean. What did Yechezkel say about himself to be mishabeich himself? He said the following: Unevela utreifa loy achalti min rayarata. I never ate a nevela or treifa my entire life. So obviously the Gemara is going to point out it can't just be praising himself. I never ate a nevela or treifa either. So what is he referring to? Obviously he's mentioning chumras. V'leiba b'fi b'sar pigul, and I never ate pigul. So what does this mean? So hine nafshi lo metama, when he said my soul has never become unclean, That's not just, what is that referring to? It refers to he never had an improper thought in his life. That's obviously a very, very high praise. Then he said, I never ate nevela treifa. What does that mean? I never shechted an animal that was dying. So obviously the very fact that he said he never did this implies that it's normally allowed. Because if it's taka asa, you don't have to praise yourself. I never ate chazer. Of course no one eats chazer. You're from Jew. So the fact that Yechezkel had to say that I never shechted an animal while I was dying implies that it's normally mutter, but he took it upon himself to be machmer. And then he said, Shleichalti psar pigul. I never ate pigul. That's not referring to actual pigul. It's shleichalti mebehema shahir b'chacham. He never ate meat where a shaila had to be posed to a rabbi. If the shaila was posed to the rabbi, he refused to eat it. It's obviously the chumrah because it's allowed. And he never ate an animal that they did not separate the manas kahuna, like the jaw, the parts of the animal you're supposed to give it to a kohen, not shumas, but you're supposed to give it to the kohen. Even though Yechezkel was himself a kohen, he never ate it if it wasn't fully separated. Okay, and the Gemara speaks out the fact that he was praising himself that he did not eat an animal that was dying implies that it's allowed. If it's normally allowed, you understand why he's praising himself. But if you say that it's taka aser normally, then what's the chiddush? If it's taka aser, of course he's not going to do it. He's a cheskel. So this is another source that it's taka sukenes is allowed. Heichi dami sukenes. What's an example of an animal dying? Where we said animal dying. What's the definition of dying? So Amar Rabbi Yudam Kol shemamiden oisa ve'inay medes. Any animal that if you try to raise it up, pick it up, and it can't stand up under its own power. That's an example of misukenes, where you need the animal to show some vitality for it to be kosher. If it can't stand up, it's a problem, even if it's chewing wood, meaning it has very strong jaw, but it can't stand up, that's a misukenes. Even if it's eating beams, again, shows you how strong it is, it's still not considered a sign of vitality unless if it cannot stand up. Basura masnihachi. Basura has a slightly different version. I'm sorry, that was the version with Surah. Pumbedisa has a slightly different version. Heichi dami sakenes. What's an example of sakenes? Vidam Rav. Kol shemidan oisa ve'inem edes. Again, if it can't stand up. Even if it's eating pieces of wood, slightly. And Rabbi by Yechezkel Amar. Afilo echels kairis. So this is the only difference is that this is Rabbi Yehuda Rav, and the first version was Rav Chanina bar Shlamya in the name of Rav. I will stop here.